And Ajay Bodke into this conversation. Ajay, good morning to you first. What's your sense of, the lead indicators that we are getting, the car sales numbers and yesterday Sobha's numbers? Are you getting a sense that this earnings season we are again going to see pressure on at least consumer stocks, the revenues, sales not picking up for most consumer goods?
I think the second quarter earnings in our view will be a tad better than the first quarter earnings, and the relief essentially will come from the drop in interest rates that one has seen in the current quarter vis-a-vis the last quarter. Insofar as the aggregate demand is concerned, I think it still continues to remain tepid for many sectors, and it is especially pronounced in case of consumer sectors on the rural side. So I think one will have to very closely assess, I think, the results on a company-to-company basis. And there could be wide variations within a sector in terms of how the company's results pan out. Lata, I think two factors, in my opinion, will determine the trajectory of the market in the medium term. Exactly a month and a day from now, on 8th of November, the results for the Bihar elections will be announced. And if the NDA were to win there, then I think it will reinforce the government's resolve to aggressively push reforms. And it will also sort of put a lid on the disruptive tactics that a section of opposition has adopted in the parliament. Secondly, we'll also have to keep a watch on the GST bill passage in winter session. The PM yesterday in Bangalore has resolved that he is confident of pushing it through before the end of the current financial year. And the third thing is we also have to keep a watch on crude, because every $1 rise in crude leads to 6,500 crores of additional import bill. And the government's, on the fiscal side, I think 900 crores of additional burden on the government. I think, these are some of the factors that one will have to see. But there has been a relief insofar as two sectors are concerned. On the discoms, the government has finally realized the import of they need to do something, and hence the package is on the anvil. But how strongly they are able to enforce on the discoms the necessity to increase tariffs and reduce T&D losses, because we've had 2 times over the last 10 years a package being announced and it has come to a naught. And secondly, on the infrastructure side, I think the way the government got all the stakeholders together and resolved the Dabhol issue, I think that has raised hopes that a focused effort in tackling some of the large NPAs or stressed assets, I think the government is seriously looking at that.
Okay, actually that explains the Canara Bank move superior to the other public sector banks, which we were discussing with Sudarshan. Canara Bank has a huge exposure. But Ajay, how are you therefore approaching the market at this juncture? Are you looking at 8,100, 200 as levels which have all the good news and therefore you won't buy? You will wait for a revisit of 7,700 to buy? Or you think this market has got legs?
Lata, I think last 2 quarters experience has seared many investors. There has been a rally before the earnings season kicked off, and then as the earnings season disappointed, one saw sort of the market sort of plateauing or coming off. So I think even if you look at the activity in the market, after selling in of 20,000 crores of stocks in August and September, although FIs have turned buyers in October, but over the last 2 weeks, I believe 15,000 crores worth of Nifty options have been there have been trades in Nifty options. So there is a kind of caution as one heads into the earnings season. And I sort of also would tend to be in that camp. I would not rush headlong, having seen this sharp rise. Although in the medium term, I am very positive, but I would like to take it one company at a time.
Okay, so let's talk about those one companies, or rather the companies that could be beneficiaries. Before that, let's get Chandan. Coming back to the individual stocks, one pocket that did well in the last couple of days has been some of these companies that could benefit from the Skill India initiative. So names like NIIT, Aptech, and we've seen some big fund buying in NIIT as well. Is this theme something that investors can play for the long term?
I think they certainly can. On the IT, mid-cap IT side, I think we'll find a few such names. So we sort of we would be positive on some of these names. The mid-cap IT side, I think our preference continues to remain with companies like Mindtree and Persistent, although they are not directly involved in this field. But we believe that I think fundamentally, I think there is a strong earnings growth we're expecting in the medium term in these names. And we're expecting sort of a good amount of buoyancy in earnings over the next 2 years.
Actually, how are you approaching the earnings season, Ajay? where may you find positive surprises, if any?
Yeah, I think in our view, some of the auto companies, the two-wheelers, I think will continue to post tepid numbers. But we are positive, particularly on Maruti and the commercial vehicle space, because that's where month after month, for the last 6 months now, we have seen strong double-digit numbers. And hence, I think companies like Ashok Leyland and Tata Motors, although Tata Motors is mainly driven by how JLR does. But the commercial vehicle space and cars, passenger vehicles and cars are where we would bet on. In the banking space, I think some of the banks and financial institutions that depend on wholesale funding more than bank funding, companies like Shriram Transport is what we would ask investors to look at in the medium-term perspective. And some of the banks like Yes Bank and Axis Bank is where we think the results will be better than what market is expecting. So these are the two spaces: commercial vehicle space, private banking space, and selectively, I think IT and pharma are the areas where we would remain positive. Consumers is one space where I believe that the valuations are very daunting, and one needs to very, very careful, because quite a few companies, we have reached the peak of margins, and many commodities like wheat has already bottomed out. Globally, we're also seeing expectation of sugar bottoming out because of shortage in terms of production going forward in next sugar year. So I think one will need to be very cautious, because as of now, I think analysts are all factoring in that some of these agri commodities will continue to remain tepid over the medium term, but one has started to see some up move out there, and hence the question that we need to ask is whether we are already over the peak margins for some of these companies, and hence valuations would then come off if a nasty surprise comes through the next 6 to 9 months.
So these are what, paint companies or food companies? Which ones are you referring to?
Yeah, I'm referring to essentially food companies, the companies that use wheat flour, companies that use sugar as its input, the biscuit manufacturers, for instance, cake manufacturers. So these are the companies one will need to be very cautious about. And some of these are trading at daunting valuations.
Fair.
Okay. Wanted to ask you, you said, briefly that you like the pharmaceutical space. What are your top picks there? Because stocks like Lupin, Dr. Reddy's are already sitting at lifetime highs.
Yeah. See, there I think, I am slightly contrarian, and I am expecting that Sun Pharmaceuticals, which has been buffeted by a large number of negative news in the first quarter and which has taken a large hit in its first quarter numbers. I think if and when the Halol plant issue gets resolved, over the next few quarters, one can see some an upside in that company. So I think Sun, there's a limited downside in my view, and a significant upside if these issues get resolved in the medium term. In the mid-cap space, I think from 800 levels that we have been very positive on Glenmark Pharmaceuticals in expectation of a large number of ANDAs getting approved in FY16 and FY17. And year to date, I think they have received a few approvals, and we are confident that going forward they will continue at the same good clip in terms of receipt of ANDA approvals. So there I think we see medium-term upside. The other company that we had picked up and recommended quite strongly was Jubilant Life Sciences at around say 200-210 levels. The company has had a very strong run because it had turned around in the first quarter, and our belief is that the numbers over the next 3 quarters and beyond also will continue to surprise markets. And there I think we have a strong upside in the medium term of around 578 rupees. This is a medium term price target that we have.
Okay, so that is Jubilant, you said as 500?
578 is the target in life sciences over the medium term. Okay. And Glenmark Pharmaceuticals, we still have around 15 to 20% upside in the medium term.
Okay.
CNBC TV 18, celebrating 15 years of leadership.
Welcome back. We still have about a minute and a half for the pre-market rates to come in. So let's get cuts. How do you play that theme, if at all? I mean, does it make the home plays, especially affordable home guys, any more attractive?
Lata, if you recollect, on 15th September, I was in your show and I had stuck my neck out and said there'll be 50 basis point rate cut. And I had given reasons for that. The real interest rate is very high. And I think the RBI governor has effected 50 basis point cut. I think, some of these, I mentioned the answer to the previous question that, those companies that are dependent on wholesale funding, I think will be beneficiaries. And that's where I think, the affordable housing companies also will are placed very attractively. Companies like LIC Housing Finance, HDFC in particular, I think are something which will benefit going forward. So I think I'll remain constructive on both these companies.
Ajay, what is your expectation from Infosys this time around?
I think we remain positive in Infosys. Our analyst is very among the top picks in the IT sector. I think according to him, Infosys should do better than its peers in the large cap space. So there, I think in the medium term, we have a price target of around 1340, an upside of around 16 to 17% from one perspective.
Okay, not boding well for our own markets. But what about, Ajay, what about a stock like Tata Motors? That stock has rallied 15% almost in the last two trading sessions. You think the worst is over for TAMO?
I wish. I think in case of Tata Motors, one will always have to look at the global cues. And till such time that we get some sort of semblance of stability emerging from the Chinese economy, I think we will remain hostage to these violent movements in Tata Motors. That's why I said on the commercial vehicle side, if people are looking at pure plays, then they tend to look at Ashok Leyland, which doesn't have all these encumbrances hemming it. So I think Tata Motors, from medium-term perspective, looks attractive, but I will be very cautious, at every rise in case of Tata Motors. I'll always keep on looking at the cues from China and then look at a play in the company.
Okay. But Ajay, I was hearing you mention about the sugar stocks, and I just wanted to know whether this is a space that long-term investors can head into, because now global sugar prices have gone up 30% in the last 2 weeks, and these are stocks that have already rallied about 10-15% in the last couple of days. Would you buy anything here?
Unfortunately, we don't cover any sugar stocks. But the comment I made was in reference to those FMCG or those food companies that use sugar as one of its main input. And that's where those are companies that we track. And that's where I am advocating caution. If the rise persists, or even if it remains on a YOY basis, that could surprise the investors nastily insofar as the margins are.
Thank you to all three of you for joining us and taking us through the pre-opening rates. You guys have a good day. We'll see you again later on.